Hey guys, and welcome to eMentality Development's third seminar video. And in this video, we will be covering basic micro VOD analysis. So let's go ahead and begin our little one-take presentation and accept all the mistakes I make and entertain you guys as I make them. As I make them, not as... nah. See already, let's go! So, replay recording websites and programs. So, before we can do any basic micro VOD analysis or whatever, we need to be aware that, we can record our replays and review them rather than just sitting back and kind of reflecting about what we did. We can actually have the recordings. Now, there are two websites to which you can use to record your replays. The first one is ellooking.net, and the second website is op.gg. Now, some word of caution, advice, or whatever. ellooking.net does not record your replays unless you are relatively high in elo. So, I know it doesn't record it for gold. I'm not sure if it does record it for platinum by itself, but for sure, it does record diamond and higher games by itself, okay? Now, if you are gold or lower, I recommend using op.gg. Now, the way op.gg records your games is that when you go into game, you have to select, or you search up your name. Okay, so you go to your own profile in op.gg, go to your in-game info, and select record. Okay, unless you manually click record in your game, or excuse me, on the website, it will not record your game. Now, some of those things seem like a lot of work to do every single game, right? So now there exists third-party programs to which you can record your games. And all you have to do is the hassle of installing the programs first. Okay. So the first program that I really like using is Skin Spotlights. All you guys got to do is search up Skin Spotlights, download their video recording thing, and then you're done. Just follow the setup and you're good. The second one is League Summoner Info. Now, I believe the website, I checked it during the seminar, it is down. I'll actually make a quick check right now to see if it's up again. Let me just make a really quick check right now. League Summoner Info, LSI, nope, it's still down. So League Summoner Info doesn't work right now. So Skin Spotlights, that's what I recommend using. Baron Replays is also another good replay system. However, their servers still might be infected with a virus or a Trojan, so I do not recommend using Baron Replays right now. So Skin Spotlights is your go-to for a third-party recording program. Now, when you are viewing replays, you kind of have the same perspective that LCS casters have, right? When you watch LCS or watch LCS games, you see this screen minus the overlay that shows this is by Riot, this is LCS, etc. Right? That being said, I am pointing out all of the things that you need to look at and get to know when you start reviewing your VODs. Okay, and these are just the basics, and understanding them is the first step. Okay. So, starting from the top, we're going to counterclockwise direction, although this counterclockwise direction, there you go, because camera's flipped. We're going to do it like that. So, at the very top, we have the time and the amount of kills either team has had. Now, time of the game is naturally important because some champions do better early, some champions do better late, and you need to pay attention to that. And then the amount of kills that are on the board, because there is like a small psychological effect that's like, oh, if we're down 4 kills, we need to catch up. Or if we're ahead 4 kills, we have an advantage. So just take notice of that, because sometimes when you there are team fights where you're down, let's say 10 kills, it's really easy to say we should not fight this because we are behind. Give them that objective, right? So notice those. On the left and right side, we do have a visual representation of how much health your allies and enemies have, how much mana your allies and enemies have, and whether or not they have their summoner spells available, right? There are a lot of decision-making things that you would make or would not make based on whether or not you or your enemy has summoner spells, right? For example, if the enemy doesn't have flash and you have flash and you are Alistar, then making a flash play, like as demonstrated in this picture, is a good thing to do. Now again, Soraka and Lee Sin also have flash, so they could very well flash out. But in this, towards the end of the day, they didn't flash and they both died. So easy 2 kills for my team, which led us to win the game. On the bottom left corner, we do have a more specific snapshot of a champion. Now, just to get that, you just gotta click the champion themselves, and it'll give you a snapshot. It'll tell you their abilities, their passive, summoner spells, stats, etc. It's just more, right? It even shows you their buffs. Something, again, just to keep in mind that that's what it is, and sometimes you gotta pay attention to that. A champion might deal more damage because they spec'd in a certain ability, or a champion might have more survivability because they spec'd in certain ability. So, just keep that in mind. The 3 things on the bottom that I have highlighted or squared is trinkets, KDA, and items. You got to make sure you're using your trinkets. See how often you are using your trinket, how often your enemies are using your trinket. Maybe you could use it more. Maybe you could use it not just more in quantity, but more effectively as well. Because maybe you keep sweeping, if you have a sweeper, empty bushes, or if you have a ward, you're placing that ward in inefficient spots or ineffective spots. Okay, KDA is very useful for seeing whether or not champion A should be fighting champion B, or a small group of champions should be fighting another small group of champions. Right? KDA is a really good indicator of strength and advantage. Items is also another one of those indicators, because if there's an item advantage, you don't want to fight that, right? That goes without saying. By pressing X in the replay screen, you can see the amount of gold that a champion has. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, guys, gold does not translate into combat power. It translates into potential future combat power. So if you have a lot of gold, it's typically better to recall, buy your items, then go back to fight. Now your minimap. Your minimap tells you where your allies are, where your enemies are, which enemies are missing, and watching your enemy's movement if you have things sufficiently worded. The minimap is a very important tool. If you don't believe me, try playing a game without the minimap at all. Put like a sticky note on it so you can't see it. And trust me, the game gets so much harder. At least if, you use the minimap and you actually want to play League of Legends. So now, when it comes to, those micro decisions, and when you do your micro analysis and then you come to your own conclusions about what you need to do to improve, what's important is that you're able to apply what you've learned in game, right? And I want to give you guys a quick demo on the things you need to look at and the things that actually factor into your decision making when you're in game. All right, so in game, as you guys can see, I am playing Fiora in this game, and I have pointed out several things. Okay, so starting from the top, we got respawn timers. Respawn timers usually affect your decisions because you don't want to die when there's an objective about to respawn. Going to the bottom, experience is important because you power spike with experience. Okay, a level 2 champion is better than a level 1 champion. A level 3 champion is better than a level 2 champion because you have 3 spells available. Right? A level 2 champion is better than a level 1 champion because level 2 champions have 2 spells available. A level 6 champion is better than any level champion between 1 and 5 because a level 6 champion has an ultimate. Level 9 champions have possibly a maxed out ability. Level 11 champions have level 2 ult, and so on and so forth. So, taking care to notice your experience advantages, such as hitting a certain level before your opponent, or being a certain level above your opponent to begin with, are good ways to notice whether or not you have an advantage or not. Next thing is your abilities. The ability HUD here tells you whether or not an ability is up, how you are skilling your abilities, where your passive, explanations, ratios, etc. Those are just important. And so pay attention to whether or not you have abilities available, right? A jungle gank, for example, is more effective when you have your abilities up. It's very unlikely you will get a successful gank if you don't have your stun up, for example. right? So be aware about it, communicate it. Your HP and mana, I mean, that's your current condition. If you are high HP and high mana, you are more than happy to fight. But when you are low, you have to act more scared. You have to be more cautious. So make sure you do factor in how healthy you are when you fight, and before you fight and after you fight. Summoner spells, same thing as before. You just got to make sure you know what summoner spells you have and what summoner spells your enemy has. Specifically for top lane, where you could be running teleport, your opponent might be running ignite, and it's important to notice that so you don't put yourself into a situation where you duel one-on-one and you lose because your opponent ran ignite. Okay? Trinket, just make sure you're using it all the time, and it does have a little timer thing, so just make sure you do it and you use it. Minimap is a minimap. Like I've said, it tells you where you are, where your allies are, where your enemies are, which allies are missing, or excuse me, which enemies are missing, which enemies or allies are there to help you or your opponent if you guys end up fighting, and rotations. Okay, your minimap's very important. You should never make a decision without consulting your minimap. The minimap is like your best friend who never leaves you alone. Okay. Allies are there as well next to the minimap, so look at the minimap, see if there's any allies near you, and take a look at their current condition to see if they can fight with you or not. Okay. Time and ping. So time in the game, obviously very important. Some champions do better early, other champions do better late. And your ping, you actually add your ping to your reaction time. So if my reaction time, let's say, was, like say the average 270 milliseconds, you would add your ping, or my ping, at this point it's 64 milliseconds, to my reaction time. So my 270 millisecond reaction time plus my ping, which is 64, is 334. Pray to God my math is right. And so what that means is that if something were to jump out of nowhere, let's say a Flash Malphite ultimate, or a Rengar coming out of stealth, and I don't even notice the little exclamation point on top of my head, it means that it will take my ping plus my reaction time in terms of milliseconds to react. So it would take me 334 milliseconds at minimum to react. So if you are playing champions or which require precision timings, right? Your ping and your reaction time factors into that. So I wouldn't play champions that really would require me to have more than 300 milliseconds of reaction time. Okay? That's just what it means. Naturally, if your ping is low, reaction time is faster. Let's say if my ping was 0, like it was perfect, right? Every action that I input immediately occurs. Okay? Instead of having a buffer period of 64 milliseconds. Then the amount of time it would take for me to react to a stimulus that came out of nowhere would be 270 milliseconds. Right? So ping does matter. Now let's go ahead and split them into factors, right? Factors of analysis. There are some factors which actually immediately affect you, like right away. These are the first things you should be thinking about before you commit to a play or to a fight. Okay? Do this before, absolutely before. Okay? Factors of analysis, which that are called external pressure factors, are things you should kind of consider after. These are secondary. Okay? Still before you commit to a play, but not as important as previous ones. Okay? So your ping, definitely very important. I already mentioned that. Current conditions, it just makes sense that you consider whether or not you yourself have an advantage in the fight, right? If you're low HP, or you're down in item, or you're down in levels, it's not going to be a fight that you want to take. Okay? But if you are ahead, it's a fight that you would want to take. You also need to consider nearby allies or enemies. Because when you fight, and you're not going to be alone, you need to factor in all of the interference that could happen. And the minimap. Minimap should, again, is your really quick snapshot of your external pressure factors, and you can get quite a bit of information just by looking at it. External pressure factors include gold, Mia's, distant allies and enemies, respawn timers for objectives, and game length. Gold goes without saying because gold is your potential combat ability in the future, not present. Okay, so after you say, oh, I probably should take this fight, I have an advantage, well, you can look at your gold and be like, oh, I do have 2,000 gold. I could spend 2,000 gold right now and have a larger advantage over my opponent. Rather than fight him right now where I don't necessarily have an advantage besides a level. I don't know. Because sometimes buying a BF sword, a boot, and a long sword is the advantage you need to win the game. Okay? Mia's are external pressure factors because you don't know where they are. You just kind of tailor your play style depending on who's missing, right? If you don't know where the jungler is, you should, more or less, play cautiously, right? So then you don't die. That's all it is. Distant allies and enemies. The reason why you need to factor in distant allies and enemies is simply because you need to respect globals and teleport. If you respect globals and teleport, then when your opponents use their global abilities or teleport, they don't get a free kill because you weren't paying attention to them. Twisted Fate, very good mid laner that roams a lot, right? If the side lanes don't pay attention and don't respect him, right? They don't respect that distant enemy, they are gonna die if they decide to make a play and they overextend and it's so close that it only takes a little bit of a push for either side to win, and then the enemy side wins because the Twisted Fate was able to show up because of his ultimate. I mean, same thing with teleport. If top lane has teleport, but the other top laner doesn't have teleport, the top laner with teleport does have an advantage if his enemies aren't paying attention and respecting the fact that he has that teleport. So that's why it is an external pressure factor. It's not always going to be there, but it may be there. Respawn timers for objectives, yet another temporary external pressure factor. You don't want a fight to go bad, or you don't want to die when an objective is about to respawn, or when there is an objective that could be taken. Okay, so before any play, again, you need to kind of recognize, do I need to make this play now, or should I save my resources for a later fight? Game length is last but not least. Some things should be done in the early game, some things shouldn't be done later in the game. A good example is Baron. Unless your team is super OP or super ahead, you don't want to do Baron when it spawns. You want to do right. But if it's like a normal game, for example, you could do Baron safely, more or less, in 30 minutes, not at 20. Okay. Again, if you're playing a champion like Jax, for example, you're not necessarily the strongest until you have your items. So you want to wait till you have your items, and you'll have your items as the game goes on. So you will want to pick less fights in the beginning and more fights later where you're stronger. Okay. And essentially all of those are the factors that you consider. Very quick snapshot one more time if you want to pause and just kind of note these down of everything you should take a look at. I mean, I've highlighted also, but I didn't talk about in terms of hitting tab, it does show which keystone mastery you do have, your KDA, your CS. Make sure your CS is high, as well as the enemy team and their items. So you can definitely look at the comparisons, especially between you and your rival, right? You can click your rival and have a display of their level and their items, but I mean, you can also do it using tab, and it's more convenient this way. So everything that I've shown you guys so far are the basics. They are the basics. Notice them and understand them by yourself. I should have given you guys a good start, but the rest now goes on to you. It is your responsibility to make sure you guys understand this yourselves, because these are the basics. If you cannot understand the basics, you will not understand the more advanced analytical things that exist, which typically come from deriving information from these basics. Okay, but again, these are the basics. So understand them, live them, love them, make love to them, etc. And with that marks the end of this seminar presentation video, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Ciao.